Welcome to Health System CIO's interview with Dr. John Lee, emergency physician at Edward Hospital in Naperville, informaticist, and Epic consultant. I'm Anthony Guerra, founder and editor in chief. Dr. Lee, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Anthony.
All right, great. Let's start off. You want to tell us a little bit about your organizations and your roles?
Well, I have a lot of roles. I spend a lot of time in the ER. I'm a practicing ER physician. I also help out my clinical organizations, IT efforts, particularly surrounding Epic. And I also do Epic consulting for outside organizations and help various organizations help navigate the Epic waters.
All right, great. Now, I believe you were just at the Epic user group meeting, which took place fairly recently.
Yes, absolutely.
And you're posting, you're an active LinkedIn poster, which I love because I keep an eye on your content and try and get it to our audience. So it's great stuff. We'll go into some specifics, but
Sure.
overall, thoughts on the show, takeaways, anything, and how many have you been to? Was this one different in any way? Just like to hear your general impressions of the conference.
Yeah, this is I think I looked at my badge and I think this is the 12th UGM that I've been to. The it's definitely changed over the 12 times that I've gone there. I was commenting to some of my colleagues that back when I started attending, we would go to the conference. It had some interesting stuff. We would discuss a lot of interesting stuff with a lot of colleagues. It was very stimulating. And then we would go back to our hotel room and try to figure out where to eat dinner. It has grown way beyond that. Now there's all sorts of other things going on, and not the least of which is the uh, piano bar event that I try to instigate every UGM and XGM. So that's
What event is that? Say that again.
so there's actually a little bit of a story behind this that one of the favorite places me and my teams used to always love going to is this piano bar called the Ivy Room in Madison. We would that would always be the highlight of our like trips, whether we were up there for training or for other reasons. And I was always dismayed during UGM and XGM that this place was closed during the week because I mean, it's a piano bar, so it's mainly open on the weekends, but they didn't. I don't, yeah, I contacted the owner and I said, do you realize that there's like 40,000 people looking for something to do during the week? And she had no idea. And so I arranged to have it open during the week during XGM and UGM. And she recognizes me and thanks me every time I walk in for the piano bar event.
Now, was that open for your private benefit of your party or
No, no,
open for the world?
I just told her, look, you're missing out on a huge opportunity, and at the same time, uh, I really like going there and commiserating and enjoying time spending with some of my longtime friends from around the country. It's just
Mhm.
it ends up being a really fun time.
Does it get too crowded to get in sometimes now?
It is starting to. I mean, it was about half full when we first started doing this a few years ago. Now by, 11 o'clock at night, it's pretty much wall to wall people.
Uh-huh. Wouldn't that be ironic if you can't get into the place that you helped
No,
open up to everybody?
I'm pretty sure she would let me in.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, well, beyond, the, festivities, which I'm
Hmm.
sure are quite extensive now, and now it's picking picking what you wanna do in the evening, I would assume. Um, thoughts on trends, things you saw there. It's big stuff now. I mean, that's a
Yeah, I mean, I would
deal.
say that clearly the two really, really big themes that Epic is really jumping on is artificial intelligence and Cosmos, both of which will merge together into some pretty pretty interesting workflows and tools going forward, I predict.
Mhm. Well, tell me a little bit more about that. Tell me about the workflows and tools. All right, let's take it from this perspective. Um, you have a massive base of health systems that are
Right.
using Epic. there's I'm sure, a massive amount of tools in Epic. There's some standard that everyone uses, and I'm sure there's second and third level usage, functionality that not everybody uses, sort of power users get to. And I think Epic's got a methodology of awarding stars or whatnot, or
Sure.
levels for the amount of
Mhm.
use. Um, you could have health system A that's using the system extensively, and you probably have many health systems that are not using it anywhere near its full potential. There are issues around change management, how long it's been instituted, and I guess the quality of the informatics team in the health system. There's lots of issues there, but do you have any sort of high level philosophical thoughts about use and how much use you should be getting out of these tools?
Well, just broadly, I would say that back of the napkin, most Epic organizations are probably using somewhere less than 25% of the utility of Epic.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. But there's just enormous potential that people are leaving on the table. And I do think that some of the efforts to get organizations to move towards what they call foundation, to get a more of a standard build, will
Hmm.
help facilitate uncovering and surfacing up some of the functionality that is heretofore unused. And
Right.
I think that's going to be even more of a um, factor as we go into this Cosmos-based epic future. And I think that there's going to be increasingly tools that are sourced from the Cosmos database that will flow directly into clinical workflows and actually be highly operational and really start influencing clinical decisions and operational workflows.
Is there, what's your main advice that you give to organizations when you do your consulting, or what's some typical issues you see as far as a lack of usage among the suite? Some commonalities you're finding when you go into organizations.
Well, I've seen well, there's a lot of things that I see that I would love to be able to help change. So I think there is a lot of um, very granular customization that often occurs that makes it difficult to kind of take content and tools from one organization and plop them down in another organization. And then on top of that, there's a lot of approaches that people uh, that organizations use to be, I think, overly restrictive some with the tools, particularly on the analytics side of things. Um, and then uh, connected with both of those is that there's just a what I find is real opportunities to instill some better operational and clinical data governance on things that a lot of organizations, I think most organizations actually have not fully leveraged.
Operational and clinical data governance, right. And that sounds to me like the hard work. It's is this the kind of
Yeah.
say, it's a lot easier to buy a piece of technology and even implement it and turn it on.
Uh-huh. Right.
This is the stuff where you have to deal with the humans who are doing things the way they've always done them and really don't like change, and
Right.
you need a lot of governance committees and meetings and hashing things out and coming to consensus, and this is the painful stuff.
Right. And there are a couple I just actually posted something on Substack about vendors and how they interact with Epic. And also a couple of weeks ago, I had a similar piece on what we have our Epic analysts build. A lot of times we create the content in our EMRs writ large, but certainly within Epic, I've seen where we highly tailor the content and make it the way that we want it to work rather than the way that it should work. There's a lot of detail and nuances to that, but I'll use myself as I'll throw myself under the bus. When we transferred from another system to Epic, we had some highly tailored content that worked really well in the other system. We ended up porting that and actually replicating that within Epic. That was it worked really well initially because my docs really had very little transition. They just kind of floated directly into Epic, and we were pretty much back at our normal level of productivity within really a few days. But the long tail of that and the penalty that we accrued is that a lot of the stuff that Epic put into place that was dependent on what they call standard or foundation build didn't work because we had highly tailored our work environment. Now, at the same time, there are things that you can do that don't affect that underlying foundational and data governance infrastructure, but you have to know where to fight that fight and where to try to preserve as much of the Epic foundation as possible. And it takes somebody who knows how to think like a clinician and also somebody and also knows how the underlying uh, Epic is configured and what the data structures are like underneath to really be able to do that really well.
Well, that's fascinating, right? So you have to know where to fight your fights, and if
Hmm.
you don't, you can be fighting the wrong fights that don't matter, and you could be just easily give in there, make your clinicians happy with some customization, um,
Right,
and you could give in on the fights that do matter. So,
right.
and does Epic do a good job of helping you understand that, or not so much?
Um, I would say to a moderate degree. I think they push a lot of their standard build and standard configuration, and that has become a cultural norm within Epic and Epic organizations. But they don't necessarily do a good job at the why. Like, so for instance, I we are actually at my the organization that I work clinically at, we are in the process of actually rebuilding our instance of Epic, mainly for because of uh, uh, mergers. Basically, we wanted to start fresh. But um, what isn't uh, isn't fully uh, well described or explained is the why we want to go with foundation. There becomes this almost cultural. We got to do it because it's foundation. We got to do it because it's foundation. But then you have to do a little bit of digging. Why do you want to do it? Because it's foundation? And there's primarily two reasons. One is it's easier to build, and the second is that it preserves their underlying configuration and data infrastructure. If you can do it in such a way that, yes, it may be more difficult to build, but it has outsized uh, clinical or operational impact, and it doesn't really mess around with the underlying structures, then that is something that you want. That is a customization that you want to emphasize. If you do something that, say, may really optimize your legacy workflows that existed before Epic, but it completely messes up the data infrastructure, I would think long and hard about doing that. And think about actually changing your legacy workflows to fit what Epic Foundation is, particularly if the legacy workflows oftentimes are kind of hacked together and jury rigged and look like some sort of operational Rube Goldberg machine, but it's
Mhm.
just something that they've worked with for decades and everybody's used to it. Just because it works and you're used to it doesn't mean that it should exist.
Very good. You mentioned that you're doing a rebuild to foundation because of a merger. That sounds
Hmm.
really interesting. Um, it sounds like something that, you see a lot. It's going to be work, but you see a lot of upside, or almost it's just
Oh yeah.
gotten done to get us where we want to be. Just tell me more about the dynamics of a merger, the situation you found yourself in, and the decision that you said, "Hey, we're going to have to just redo this thing here."
Well, I think there's a lot of obvious reasons to do that. If you're an Epic organization, one of the things that make Epic worth being your EMR, having as your EMR, is that it has a lot of tight integration. If you are trying to operate in our situation, we're going from three instances of Epic to one. If you're trying to operate across three instances of Epic, you have basically negated a huge chunk of the value of Epic. It's this tight integration of all the different data flows that work across the system. And so the value add is that we can operationalize a lot of the things that we want to be able to do um, with far less friction. Now, we have to do a lot of like foundational stuff, like build the system first, and that in and of itself is really, really painful. But the goal is afterward we end up having standard set of tools, be able to surface up uh, uh, insights very cleanly because we're only utilizing one set of data. And then once we come up with insights, we can come up with a single set of configuration tools to help us achieve some of the clinical and operational goals that we want to achieve.
I'd like to let's go into these terms a little bit to make sure I have it right here.
Sure.
Foundation is sort of the base build of Epic, the out of the box, the way they say to do it. If you were to have two instances, let's
Yeah.
say two different organizations are merging and they're both on Epic, those are
Hmm.
two different instances. If they're both built to Foundation with non significant customization, we talked about significant versus non significant.
Hmm.
If they're both built to foundation and those organizations come together, will you have no reason to rebuild, but you can basically plug those two organizations together?
Uh, there's less reason to rebuild
Okay.
because you will have a lot of normalization of the data, but it will be almost impossible or very difficult to actually operationalize a lot of the transactional stuff. So for instance, let's say using some of the data insights from the two instances, you come up with the fact that, hey, we need to create a new heparin protocol, for instance. And we need to create the heparin protocol for this particular clinical situation. You still have to build two different protocols in both instances. And then you have to then map those pieces of data to see outcomes and compliance to two different data warehouses, which then you could probably merge together at at a different level, but you will have two instances of Epic's Caboodle, which is their data warehouse. So there would be less reason to do that, but I can almost guarantee you if you have two different instances of Epic, even if they're clean vanilla foundation, over time they will start drifting
Mm.
because of various decisions that are made, and you will end up with very discordant systems.
So, best case scenario, two organizations or one always acquires the other, even though we use the term merger, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have one health system acquires another health system or acquires a single standalone hospital and is gonna bring it into its let's say it's
Right.
got 5 hospitals and they're on one instance of Epic at the 5 hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
They're acquiring a hospital that's on Epic and it's a vanilla foundational build. You are still not gonna just be able to plug it in. You still have to
No.
sort of rec or
Right.
and I don't
And
know the proper terminology here, but you
yeah,
basically to get them onto your instance and do away with their instance.
and there are plenty of those types of stories around. And I would also uh, point out that when you say foundation, it's not like you turn Epic has the foundation built for you. Foundation is basically there's very little that's actually pre-built. You still have to build everything,
Mhm.
but Epic just has foundation specifications for you to build it in the way that is considered foundation. So
Okay.
foundation is actually a reference to the design and not to the actual records and uh, systems that are delivered to you.
Got it. But the issues that you mentioned are still important about knowing where to customize and where not to customize. Because even though you're always going to kind of have the challenges we talked about different instances, you still be ahead of the game if you have not done customizations in these sort of danger areas that you mentioned that are going to cause you a lot of trouble down the road, correct?
Right. So again, to throw myself under the bus,
Yeah.
when we created our ED, we created a whole proprietary list of ED chief complaints,
Okay.
which we were accustomed to using from
Right.
before.
Right.
Uh, the problem with that is that a lot of if you know how emergency departments work, a lot of the stuff that you do is connected to chief complaints. So if you come in with chest pain, you tend to order a certain set of things. If you come in with abdominal pain, you would tend to order uh, a bunch of other different stuff. And then on top of that, Epic has all sorts of other data and other analytic products that are dependent on their standard list of chief complaints so that then you can kind of benchmark yourself against other Epic organizations.
Right.
We didn't, I didn't realize that when we first went live. And basically by creating this list of chief complaints, we shot ourselves in the foot. And it and eh, I'm I'm thankful that I have an opportunity now to actually fix that.
So, I mean, the reality of why we do these things is that we have clinicians like yourself,
Hmm.
who are very, very busy, and we want to make them happy, right? I mean, this is one of the major dynamics in healthcare IT. Um,
Sure.
the IT suite, the IT department had better be interested in making their clinicians happy, or they won't be an IT department for very long.
Hmm.
Um, and therefore, you have a tendency to compromise, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but to extend yourself to compromise to be as flexible as possible. Your point is that you have to know where to be flexible and where you can't. If you realize, or if you get the knowledge that these are the areas you cannot be flexible, and yet these are the same areas that at least initially are going to cause major a clinician dissatisfaction, you have to be able to hold the line there and explain yourself, right? This is why I cannot make this easier for you. This is why this is
That is,
painful right now. Tell me a little bit about that.
and so that actually goes back to what the question that you asked me before, is that is Epic good at doing, you know, creating some sort of justification for being on Foundation? Um, and that sort of story doesn't get actually played out very well in these Epic implementations. Very often, what ends up happening is just a mantra of we got to stick with Foundation, we got to stick with Foundation, we got to stick with Foundation. But you want to start peppering in and seasoning that argument, that narrative with the why, and going back to and then also recognize that there are ways to actually uh, configure the system so that you actually can have the best of both worlds.
Mhm.
So in use my chief complaint, ED chief complaint example. One of the things that we can do is actually put what we call synonyms behind the scenes so that if I look up a chief complaint that I'm used to putting in, it will point me to the alternative or the that is part of the quote unquote epic released list
Mhm.
so that it ends up being uh, seamless. It helps uh, reduce the friction of that transition, but you still are able to preserve that underlying uh, data governance and infrastructure.
Yeah, and I mean, I would imagine sometimes that's not the easiest argument to sell. I
Hmm.
mean, you're basically telling a physician that no, you need to use the terminology or the definitions that our IT vendor came up with, not the clinical one you want.
Um, I think that generally speaking, the content in Epic is so rich that
Uh-huh.
there's and this is actually one of the problems with Epic is that there's so many different ways to do the same thing that there's almost always a path that is relatively low friction.
Mhm.
And you just have to, again, know where you can do that configuration
Right.
and you can point people. to a direction that actually is not that painful, but also preserves the content that you need to preserve.
So to do this right, it sounds like, and again, we usually write for the CIOs and certainly the CMIOs. But let's keep the CIOs in mind.
Hmm.
If you were talking to a CIO or CIOs, and you were saying, "Hey, listen, if you're," and a lot of them have already been down this road, right? But now
Hmm.
we're sort of in we're not in an implementation, we're in an optimization, always in an optimization phase. But certainly you could have a lot of this M&A stuff is very,
Hmm.
true and very coming up all the time. So, drilling down on the dynamics of dealing with even an epic to epic acquisition, right? As I mentioned, a large health system on Epic
Hmm.
acquiring a hospital on Epic, and we talked about the instances and the issues you gotta deal with there. So this is gonna be coming up all the time. It sounds like, your advice around this is you have to educate yourself, Mr. or Mrs. CIO. You had either educate yourself or hire or both to understand these issues that we've discussed around instances, customization, what's safe, what's not safe, foundation, and all these things. Understand where you can be flexible and where you can't, and beyond that, understand the importance of explaining yourself and being transparent with your users who are being affected. It sounds like that's a high level of best practice here.
That's accurate, but the devil is always all known. Yes.
Well, tell me
Because
more about the devil. Tell me about the
so
details.
um, there are times where uh you may want to, for instance, stray away from foundation.
Mhm,
And if you know both the operational and clinical reasons why there may be some benefit to doing that, and also know uh, the underlying technical build to
mhm.
do some of this stuff, and have a good understanding of, yes, the technical build is kind of moderately complex, but the benefit for our organization is way off the charts. Then you can encapsulate that argument in a much better way than somebody who may be just a clinical leader who doesn't know anything about the IT, or the IT people who say, no, this is too built difficult. Um, we don't have time for this. That ticket is gonna be deprioritized. But if you can kind of meld this stuff together and understand where these opportunities exist, that's where you're gonna, I think, that's where I think the top performing Epic organizations, at least on the clinical side of things, will excel. And that's the perfect role for a clinical informaticist. And
Right.
as a corollary to that, the type of people in the Epic world that would be highly skilled at doing that are they're physician builders. And this is actually one of the reasons why in the Class Arts Collaborative, it was so apparent that the organizations that had not only people trained to be physician builders, basically physicians who know how to do analyst work, that they were also the highest performing Epic organizations in their surveys.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right with you here. I think I'm understanding what you're saying, and
Hmm.
um this tool, this Epic tool, whatever you want to call it, platform is so massive and so complex,
Hmm.
uh, that it requires specialization in and of itself, right? So
Hmm.
you mentioned these physician builders. Um, so there's a lot of things that have to come together here. You've got to know this tool inside and out, which is probably a life's work, right? It's like somebody
Hmm.
has to devote their life to understanding the Epic tool, and it's great if that same person understands the work it's supposed to execute. Therefore, you have the physician builder. They
Right.
understand
Hmm.
what they need the tool to do, and they
Hmm.
understand the tool. CIO is not going to understand either of those to that degree, right? They're IT
Right.
generalists, and
Hmm.
they should know enough about operations to be dangerous. And then you have the CMIO, who's obviously a deeply clinical person and has general knowledge of IT, but certainly may not be a specialist on Epic intricacies and everything.
That that depends on the organization. Like
Right.
I was a former CMO,
Right.
and so and I prided myself on knowing the Epic application as well, actually, as any of the Epic analysts.
Okay.
And I know certainly of CMIOs. I know of one or two CMIOs who actually are able to do direct cache code programming. They know how to do the M code. They know how to program in mumps. But one of the things that happens is, and we could go on into a long discussion about this, but the one of the big themes that I hear from organizations that don't want to do this uh, is that, and they actually devalue this sort of. They will say, "You're a physician. We're paying you to be a physician. If you want to do this IT stuff, just do it on your own time. We're not going to pay you for it." Well, I kid you not. Or they'll say, "We see you doing analyst work. We'll pay you the analyst rate." I have heard that as well. But what ends up happening is that uh, what ideally what happens is that yes, maybe we get in there and actually do some direct configuration, but we understand the tool well enough that we can actually uh, do some high level architecture recommendations so that we can speak the IT speak to the analysts
Mm-hmm.
so that they can actually get their job done faster without a
Mm.
lot of the swirl and back and forth that would normally occur with the sort of the classic IT clinician or operational dyad.
Right.
It where they may be speaking the same language, but they're like kind of talking past each other, and they don't really
Right.
understand what each other is saying.
Right. So when it comes to, and I want to have some fun here and talk a little bit about
Mhm.
Oracle, but when it comes to um the knowledge, now you've got knowledge that obviously you would probably have much more of an impact working on an Epic involved situation as a consultant. If
Mhm.
somebody said, "Hey, Dr. Lee, we're on Oracle. I want you to come help us." And you say, "Well, I'm kind of a specialist on Epic." And they say, "Listen, we don't care. We want you to come. We figure you'll help us with something." Do you know enough like to be dangerous over there? Could you do a lot over there? Or is so much of your knowledge tied to Epic that you're like, "You know what? I'm just not the guy for that."
I would probably say that just because
Mhm.
it's not at this point, it's probably not worth my effort.
Right.
That being said, I think I know enough about just generally operational workflows, how that connects with data. I know how to manipulate data a um, at an analytic level. I actually taught myself SQL so I could do Cosmos work. So, you know, there are some broad stroke types of things that kind of a generalist informaticist
Mhm.
can offer in that situation. And I would say that, you know, you've seen one CMIO or one clinical informaticist. You've seen one CMI or one clinical informaticist. Um, there's just such a wide variety.
Right. All right, well, let's like I said, let's have a little fun here.
Sure,
Competition is good. We know that. Competition makes
absolutely.
organizations better. Um, there's not that much competition in the EHR space for large health systems, although Oracle might argue that point. Um, do you have any high level thoughts on the dynamics of what you've seen between these two organizations, or just take them one at a time? Or we kind of discussed Epic, but what do you think of what's going on with Oracle Health? I mean, in a sense, do we want to see competitor some success here, some competition for Epic because we think it'll make Epic better in the long run?
Well, I certainly hope so. I really do not want to see an a landscape where there's only one EMR. That would be, I think, bad for for the country. Um, and if you think about what at least the rhetoric, I don't have any insight on to the actual exact details of what Oracle's doing, but just based on their rhetoric, I think that is the right decision for them to make. They are probably losing out on opportunity in the short term because it's taking them a while to build what they're trying to build. And but if you think about what they talk about in terms of creating an underlying um, framework and infrastructure that then they can build upon that is all AI first, and everything is based upon that underlying foundation. It's actually right along the lines of that that post that prompted you to reach out to me. They will actually uh, kind of out Epic because one of the things that Epic did that was that really set them apart was that we're not going to buy anything. We're not going to bolt on solutions. We're not going to, you know, buy Siemens and call it Cerner, and then all of a sudden everybody has Cerner, or or Eclipsys and Allscripts, and put them together and say,
Yeah, I
okay, well
remember
now we
that.
have inpatient and ambulatory, everything should work fine, right?
Right,
Well, not so much.
right.
Um, but at least the rhetoric that I hear from Oracle is that they're building it all as one interoperable, self-interoperable piece of functionality. So, for instance, what I understand is that they are building their own ambient documentation platform. So you don't have to work with a bridge or ambience or DAX. It is just part of the EMR. Um, so if they can accomplish that, they might be able to recover some of the things that they've lost. But they are losing, Epic may be too far ahead of them at this point. And in particular, given the work that they've done with Cosmos, that may be difficult to catch up on because has now had like 5+ years of experience building up this content and this infrastructure, and they're just accumulating reams and reams and reams of data. They can come up with insights and have an action arm within Epic's hyperspace to actually act on on these insights at a much faster clip than any other organization out there.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're absolutely right. It seems like it's taking a while. Right, so to the dynamic that you mentioned is that they're gonna drop on the industry this amazing tool that
Yep.
everyone who was on Epic will feel like they're on a dinosaur, and you would have this mass migration, which is not gonna happen. There's too much invested in these instances of Epic. There's too much cost, there's too much sunk
Hmm.
knowledge. Um and you would not switch from A to B for an incremental improvement. It would have to be some massive, massive improve you'd have to be foolish to be running Epic. Like if they came up with their new thing, you'd have to be foolish, or it would have to be negligent to your patients to be running Epic at that point to get people to switch. So, it just seems to me that, as you said, every day that ticks by, um, I mean, is it even possible in your mind that what they could come up with would be so much better that it could I mean
I mean, there's just some insane stuff coming out of in technology and AI now. So
Mhm.
it's certainly possible, but Epic is creating a pretty significant moat.
Right, and there's no reason to think that Epic I guess you wouldn't describe Epic as stagnant in any sense. It's not like you're
No.
saying, "Oh, they are just sitting there, and if someone just steps up, they're ready to fall." No, they're
Hmm.
pretty active, right? They're trying to move
Hmm.
things forward. So in your mind, you wouldn't describe them as sort of ripe for the picking.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, fascinating, Dr. Lee. Let me just get a final thought from you, and then I'm gonna let you go. This has been a lot of fun. I usually frame this up by say, your best piece of advice to someone. You're an informaticist. Let's say the work
Hmm.
you do at your health system, right? When you're in your health system, helping. Your best piece of advice to someone in your position doing that kind of work somewhere else who's got a few less years of experience than you, help you at another place do your job better. What's your best piece of advice?
Well, if you're at an Epic organization and if you're an informaticist,
Yes.
I would lean into being a physician builder and really understanding the system from a technical perspective as well as the analysts.
All right. That works. Listen, Dr. Lee, I want to thank you so much for your time today. This was a lot of fun, and I hope we run into each other soon and I can catch up with you again down the road.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.
Thanks.